Yeah. Is
We're
everybody
on.
here?
Yes.
Yeah. 9.
Good morning. Thank you for attending. My name is Harrison Pierce. I'm the chairman of the Health and Human Services Commission. Our directors of Human Services and Health are not here today, but they forwarded their reports, and so we have that information. I'll highlight a few things and you can all feel free to jump in when you want to. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the April 4th, 2024 minutes. Any questions, corrections? Would we accept?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you for doing a very good job with us.
Always.
Not having been here at the meeting and being able to zero in was helpful.
She's special.
Okay. Yeah, reports. Health Department, Jen mentioned not here. Some of the highlights, a few of them quickly. So we're in tick season. The tick-related diseases have started to increase. The suicidal ideation from our numbers, that was impressive. The numbers there, 18 over the last 3 months, 6 per month, pretty significant. And going through her report, all the educational opportunities for the community, it's impressive. Any other comments or perceptions, highlights, whatever? Okay.
Suicidal ideation, we probably don't know the answer, but I wonder, is it seen in other parts of the area or just?
I would presume, yes. I think this is.
The trend.
One trend, Commissioner Barksdale, that I'm seeing right now in some of the research is study drugs to increase utilization of study drugs during exams and finals and things of that nature. It's now risen up to 1 in 4 kids in high school and 1 in 5 in college. So those are studies that just came out. And so, part of withdrawal of using, and probably our physicians can speak more clearly about it than I can, but the withdrawal coming off of it is depression sometimes. And so there are people out there trying to see if there is a link between suicidal ideation, depression, and the increased utilization of study drugs.
Reminds me of the old days with no dose.
Exactly. Whatever happened to just a good firm cup of coffee? Right?
Yeah,
Cheers.
that's like- Espresso did the trick.
Yeah.
Human Services Department, some of the highlights, this is unwritten, but Bethany does spend lots of time, and this is significant in her role, going over case studies with Marcy and Jackie, and she likes it and is good at it. She's got lots of experience. We've all seen the increased numbers that the health department is just in every facet. It's busier year after year. And lastly, the New Canaan urgent assessment. So we're pretty stable with the numbers, roughly 10 per month. But that's 120 a year, which is a significant number. It's great that the community has it. I hope it can continue. I thought the numbers would increase, as I think most of us did. But there are lots of other avenues out there. I know Stanford Hospital Pediatric Department over the last 2 months has seen an increased number of behavioral health issues, somewhat like they see in midsummer, and they're being directed there, and that's, they're going elsewhere too, maybe child guidance, whatever.
Midsummer, busy season?
Yeah, it's, kids out of school, getting into trouble, parental conflict, this, that, and the
I have
other.
a comment.
Pardon me?
A comment that I had a call from a couple of folks that I know in the government at Newtown are interested in the urgent assessment or have contact. I put them in contact with Andrew directly. So the word is getting out that what we're doing here is the real point of the story.
Any comments on Bethany's report? Okay, we will move on to old business, so meetings. So this was consensus of the commission that we wanted to continue the monthly meetings. Bethany will have the report monthly. She will be here monthly. Jen will have the report monthly, and she will be here quarterly. The calendar. So in December, we unanimously approved the calendar for the year. the calendar does have no meeting, which is traditional in August, and also no meeting in July, which is traditional when it falls on July 4th, which it does this year. There was some concern that maybe we need a meeting in July. I think let's just put that on hold, see what we evolves over the next month, and in June, if we feel like we need a meeting, we can have it in July. Accord?
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, so moving on. This could be the shortest meeting ever. See what happens when Jen and Bethany are here?
Yeah.
Let's see, new business.
That was Harrison.
No, I used my name once. That is enough. Thank you. New business, health and human service topics. Thank you all for contributing. There are lots of different topics, but and lots of overlap too. And these are all the things that Health and Human Services, that's what they deal with. So in conjunction with the agencies out there. So I think the question before us is, what do we do to augment this or actually do and related to needs that may not be addressed with all of these different, with the topics and with the agencies and what have you. So one thing that I think we recognized after the last meeting was, just our experience over the last year with the budget. So the way it used to work, so Bethany, who has a working relationship with all these agencies, would come up at the end of the year. We would look at it. She would make recommendations and we would not really rubber stamp, but we just would concur for the most part with her experience and her interactions with them. But I think after last year, we realized we had to do more. So this commission decided we would just have a liaison for each agency, which I think is good for a number of reasons. We have working knowledge with each agency, at least one of us, along with Bethany and Marcy and Jackie. And at the end of the year, when we look at budget and allotments and grants and what have you, I think we'll be maybe better positioned to make decisions. So we all listed our choices of agencies to be involved with. And so being chair, I decided to do the appointing. I tried to do the best I could to be fair. And so just to say, the 5 of you got your first choice, 2 got your second choice, 1 got the third. And there are 9 commissioners and 8 agencies. So Russ, I think you do the long straw. So we're gonna, I mean, you're not appointed to anything now, not gonna be a liaison. But let's see what evolves in the future with survey and a number of other things. We'll see how that flies. So starting looking at the list myself, Kids in Crisis, I'm still a medical advisor to the New Canaan Public School System, so I thought that would be probably the most appropriate place for me. I've done some things with New Canaan Urgent Assessment too, but I think the Kids in Crisis would be my liaison. Raquel, I think the New Canaan Cares would be a good fit for you. That was your first choice too. Tom, Get About. Yeah, the first choice. Jim. Let's see, the community program for mental health wellness. Okay, working with Paul Reinhardt and what have you would be a good position for you. Peter, you've been involved somewhat with New Canaan Urgent Assessment, so that's your assignment. Okay. Alyssa, Domestic Violence for you. And Barb, Meals on Wheels. I thought that one day when we did that would be, you have some experience in it.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great.
And Jen, Child Guidance. That'll be good. Any questions or? No.
New Meals on Wheels. Yeah, that's good.
So I think what we'll do as liaisons, we will just contact the agencies. We'll let them know we're the liaison person from the Health and Human Services Commission, and you're going to be interactive, and, you know, probably monthly communication or as needed would be adequate for that.
And should we do this independent of Bethany or in conjunction with her? Is that up to?
Well, I think we can always be in communication with her, and we will be, especially if there are perceived needs or comments or whatever, yeah. I think it's, you know, to have a couple of people and, you know, Bethany would still be in communication with these agencies, still doing what she has been doing. It's a good thing. I think the perspective is more than one person with one, especially when it comes to grants and what our sense is in terms of allotment and how important they are to the community, et cetera. We have over the last year, we did, you know, there are a few agencies which we are not granting anymore, and I went to Kathy Justy's talk the other night. I don't know if you know Kathy Justy or her history. So anyone go to the talk? I did anyway, but she commented on when she first had her illness, which was multiple myeloma. She was in Chicago, and she talked to, you know, they asked about group support and someone asked about faith, et cetera. And she said that she was, when they were in Chicago and her husband was Catholic, that there was a priest there who was just great in all of these transition things and helped them immensely. Then they moved east and she couldn't quite find the same kind of relationships. But until she went to Center for Hope, which is family centers. And she said that they were very helpful. So, you know, I'm sitting in the office and, no, in the audience, and I'm hearing this and I was saying, because they were one of the agencies that we were granting. And when I was in practice, I used them quite frequently. Death in a family, et cetera, and they were great. There has been a change there, and our human services is not as interactive with them as they were. It's become family centers, of just not the Center for Hope in Darien, family centers, which has multiple locations. But it's, you know, and I think that's an eye to the future too. Some of these agencies, like, I mean, Catholic Charities does a lot also in this area. A couple of the others, elder care, but those numbers have decreased too at elder care. So it's just
Elder House, yeah.
elder health.
Well, I know the Center for Hope gets a lot of funding from the Community Foundation. Kind of nice.
They do,
Yeah.
okay.
And family centers too.
Yeah, as a comment though, one of the reasons that human services has been so effective over the years with a very small staff is that they know how to manage the resources and available. And so those small amounts of money that we gave to these agencies that we are not giving to anymore were a ticket, so to speak, to be able to call as needed. I always felt personally that we were under funding for the amount that we use them, all of these agencies. But again, you can't be everywhere at once. I understand the fiduciary responsibility of the town and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping that we will be able to get several of these people back in harness for the town, and we'll see how it all works out as to whether you get the same amount of attention without giving them any money. But the net is that I'm hoping that we will reinstitute at least part of our agency grants that were what I call token money that gave us access without concern for taking advantage of the system. Even Kids in Crisis, quite frankly, was always heavily subsidized by other towns and the organization itself. And so I always thought that was a bargain, as it were. Anyway, that's just my personal opinion.
I have a question, and maybe it's Barb Ackenbaum, maybe it's Bethany should be here, but I mean, this is great that we've assigned these, and I think it's been very, very well thought through, and I like your idea about Jim trying to reintegrate. But what's our goal here? I mean, we kind of went through the process and we got the applications in December, and we didn't really have time to, you know, have much input, and then, you know, there was a lot of budget issues. But I mean, now it's only, what month is it, May? So, and maybe is the goal to kind of make relationships with them, with these agencies, and maybe report at some point, or, you know, how can we inform the process of next year's selection process to make it more smooth and effective. Just, as long as we've got this opportunity, what's our goal?
I would think our goal is to make sure the town's money is being well spent.
Okay.
Right.
And that's simple to
That's-
say,
Right.
but
I,
that's,
I would beg to differ with that. I think
Okay.
the town is well served. The money is, again, is a
Okay.
relatively
It's a
small
nice way
amount
to
of
put it, yeah.
money involved in this situation, so it's more a philosophy of service.
Commissioner Barstow, I would go back to our charter, right? And I keep going back there. And our charter is to make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen in terms of where the money should be spent, how much, what priorities. And I think that gets to the next agenda topic. What are our top 3 priorities that we're going to do? And I think from my perspective, it'd be better to pick those priorities, put the funding behind those priorities that we're seeking, and try to move the needle. It is alarming that even with all the programs that we have for children, that suicidal ideation is continued to growing, and that's alarming to me. And as someone that looks at a healthy community, our recommendation should be both to alarm and allow the first selectman to know that we've incorporated this data. And here's our best guess, everyone around this table, of how we should invest their money, the town's money, to try to effectuate a change and moving that needle into something that's more reasonable. So that's where I would, instead of, giving everyone $1,000, really trying to make an impact on 2 or 3 areas that we pick as the highest priority.
I think it's a great point. I think tactically, Barb, I agree with Tom that the individuals would probably, toward the end of the year, do a little report along with
Okay.
Bethany to us. So it's just extra monitoring and insight. And if something flares up during the year, which it can, that person is doing that. So it's not as much looking forward, but okay, now that we've made these investments, this is about monitoring those, governance.
Right.
And then we get to the other discussion, which is a separate thing, like, okay, what have we learned? And I did have one suggestion maybe for Russ is that, okay, these are our investments right now, but maybe during the year, we start to see another need, and Bethany's going, this organization over here. And then maybe you can be part of assessing those, because Bethany start to say, I really think we're gonna need to do something with these folks now, so it's almost like a utility there, because that's gonna be important, because we always want to look at, not just be locked into the ones we have, but being supple, and there are gonna be some new ones, and I think having one of us working with Bethany on that, maybe you could track those. Probably more work than all of us have. So-
Especially, especially
we-
as we eliminated 4, so that, those are certainly right there.
Yeah.
We know that Russ is a very valuable member of the commission, and he's data-driven to an extent. And even though we're not there yet, I mean, I've thought something will give you some function, maybe related to the survey or whatever. I mean, not that you're not a busy fellow and you're happy to pass, but there's definitely be a role. And to Russ's point, even with New Canaan urgent assessment, it's not just that we got the ARPA funding, what do we do with it? I mean, so Kevin Moynihan, Paul Reinhardt, et cetera, they had been talking just from, Kevin's has an extended family kind of experience, which attuned him to the need. Paul Reinhardt doing what he does with the vigil, et cetera, et cetera. They had in plan, they knew what the need was, and then the ARPA funding came along, so bang, it came an urgent assessment. So that's worked, and hopefully it will continue to survive.
One of the things that's going to be interesting, though, as everyone knows, there is going to be no more ARPAs. That $1 trillion strategy is not going to be happening from the feds. And so all states, all towns are going to have to figure out how to get things done more efficiently without that. But that was unbelievable money for being able to do innovations like telemed, like urgent assessment, et cetera, would have probably never happened we're certainly not at the level if we had not had the ARPA money. So I'm
Well,
sharing what everybody else is sharing out in the world at the state and in the county, as it were.
and I think, I mean, you're right, Harrison. I agree that I'm very data driven and looking at incident rates and things of that nature. I think that's where some of the drilling down can happen. When we look at domestic violence, how many New Canaan nights are being served over there, and what are those numbers? Are we seeing those increase over time? That would be important for a commission, whoever's assigned that agency, to come back and report to that. You know, these are, and so that's where I would focus our attention on what metrics are we looking for. It's one thing that we have the ARPA funds that are now discontinued. All right. We see this alarming rate. I'm just using this suicidal ideation as one. Are the services that we're providing now, is that changing? Is that moving the needle at all? Or is the suicidal ideation just continuing to grow? And no matter what we do and how much money we throw at it, it's not going to impact what is happening, what's occurring, the stressors that are occurring on our children. So that's just where I would, you know, if we have to be very fiduciary responsible, and I think that's what our selectmen are telling us. So for us, we need to, my opinion, we need to take that extra additional level of saying, this is why, this is how we justify why we're spending the money, as compared to, you know, it's a good, feel good story. Is it really effective? Is it efficient? Is it doing what our dollars well spent? That's just the next level that I think it would be
No, that's,
important.
it's great. That's considered our prime job, which is oversight.
Right.
And this is, you know, supplementing Bethany. And so there are at least two voices coming from representing the needs of different agencies, et cetera.
I'm wondering whether this may be the wrong time to bring this up, but I was thinking Lauren Patterson is somebody that we should bring before the group.
She's on the
Because
schedule.
there's the public-private partnership.
She's on the schedule.
She's on the schedule for June.
Terrific.
Okay.
Because again, we need all the eyes and ears that we can and all the funding alternatives, and she certainly would be a key person. So I'm happy to hear that.
When is their survey due back, publication?
They're still in design mode, and I think that's why she's coming, is to talk about the survey and get our input into it, which is great, because we have all kinds of questions and stuff. So
Yeah, have they hired a company or no?
I think they're gonna be speccing it out in the summer, but you don't want to do it in the summer because a lot of people aren't around, so I think it's gonna be September, October. So it was actually setting up, the time was actually really good.
Good.
So we all have our liaison assignments. I guess we have time. Let's just discuss topics and, you know, where do we go on this element of we're going to be involved with each agency, and that's one thing, but, you know, in the large scope of things that came through, the suicidal ideation, the substance abuse, misuse, that thing. And so a couple of the other topics, what do we do to really impact that is not being met already?
What were the votes, basically, as it were, from the members
In terms
of
of,
the subjects,
Priorities.
priority?
Kind of looked to me like it was mental health. and-
mental health is a definite, substance abuse,
Addiction.
domestic violence.
Mental health and substance abuse, kind of,
Yeah,
Our lane.
loneliness and isolation.
that's the
Right.
link.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah,
Put an
And
emphasis on youth mental health.
Yeah.
As a special topic.
yes.
Well, and I got an article from Susanna this week on the growing seniors' mental health issues. And if anybody is around on Monday night at 6:30, I think it is, in the library, Jeff Katzman, who's one of the leading national experts in loneliness from Silver Hill, is making a presentation.
Monday at what, 6?
6:30, I think it is, in the Bartlett Auditorium, I believe.
One reaction I think is clear that mental health, I think it's all ages, because we can all tell stories from literally every demographic involved.
Yeah.
Really concerning. Substance abuse is related, that it's a serious treatment and it's a lot very different. I do a lot like something that's a little more preventative.
Oh,
And that kind of
absolutely.
gets at the loneliness and skill building.
There's two things here. One is, what's the need or priority? And second, what are we recommend doing about it? And Peter's comment relates to the second. What is our commission recommending as an action for the town or for the agencies or whatever?
But I think the idea of, we think, so you think of a funnel, right? People not doing great, and then at a certain point, there's a full-blown mental health issue or a full-blown addiction thing. My point is more, should that be part of the priority that we should be thinking about? Like a lot of the presentations that are happening, which are education,
Right.
things like that, that we're actually trying to go further up funnel and have the town be aware of that, and that we might be interested in supporting funding in those areas, less success addiction thing. These are things that build slowly, painfully over time, and I think to really get out ahead of it, that could be a priority. And Tom, right, it's totally intermixed with what you're saying, like what are we going to do, but I think that's the topic. I think we can make a really interesting case that to deal with it, because remember your root cause?
Yeah, and what I was actually thinking, and it's kind of been on my mind during the conversation, is that specificity piece. Like, are we getting to specific individuals with some of these resources, or are we, and maybe that could get to the metric piece, like how many people in town are being served by the specific agencies that we're supporting, and maybe a marker of, with the urgent assessment, clearly that's geared towards individuals and we have a metric there, but then like with New Canaan Cares, how many people are going to your events and how many people are we serving? And having a balance there, but maybe using that as a way to kind of tease things out.
Yeah, I would just build on that. I think there's probably a role for us as a government body to try and use that as a resource and maybe get into the community. I mean, the programs that happen in the library and all these other places, maybe there's an opportunity for us to participate, partner. But I think we have to, if you're gonna do something like that, I think you want to think about it as sort of like wellness. Like maybe that should be, instead of saying misuse and this and this and this that are so negative, if we could play a role as like, let's promote public health and wellness and maybe some programs come from that. And I mean, that's getting down the road at all in terms of that, but I think that might be a role for us. It makes sense, but to try and make it positive, a spin on it, because when you say success edition, it's really true. It really happens, but maybe there's another way to position it so that it's more positive and maybe you can reach more people. They'll come and they'll participate, or we can just send that message out somehow.
I think that's a great point, and I think that the first when she loves the ideas of community and strength and stuff like that, and definitely a different kind of framing. It's really interesting to me is about like loneliness and stuff like that. Community and connectivity is one of the answers.
Right.
And I think that'd be very consistent with what he's trying to do, because people are just interacting more. Generally, the stressors go down. The kids eating and playing more and all these kinds of things. It's getting a little bit to root cause or something like that. If it's a positive spin,
Right.
that feels very New to me.
Yeah, and public health, public,
Right.
That's our role.
My only problem with events is lonely people don't go to them.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't reach them. We get the people who are preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
So how do you help people who are lonely or stressed out worried about their success? They're hard to reach.
But
They're not
even-
gonna come out.
yeah.
They're not gonna raise their hand.
Yeah, Bethany gave us plenty of examples of, even during COVID, people who were isolated and hunkering down, especially the senior population. She would call call and reach out to them, and they would say, lose my number,
Mhm,
right? And you stop
right.
bothering me, I don't wanna, right? So to Tom's point, you know, it comes back always to me, suicide ideation, substance, whatever. Can we put our resources in prevention and
Right.
trying to figure out that root cause? Because by the time that child has either tried to commit suicide or whatever, we're chasing that kid and trying to provide as much resources as we can, as compared to looking at what that root cause that got
Prevention.
that got
Prevention,
that
yeah.
person, that individual to that area. So, yeah, I mean, we could do a whole study on how to help seniors who are isolated, right? Either because of divorce or widowers, or the empty nesters, or their health condition comorbidities, and now they're relying on Meals on Wheels, and they're relying on Get About. Well, guess what? Meals on Wheels and Get About would be people that I would go and ask, why, are you having interaction, and how can we affect those people? Because we hear back from Meals on Wheels that when they deliver a meal, that person doesn't want to leave.
No.
They would want to sit there and have
They're waiting by the door.
They're waiting by the door, having a
Have a cup of
conversation,
coffee.
having a conversation with it. And maybe that is, how we use their agency to give resources or invite them to get them out of that area. So that's the analytical piece, I think, is just very complex, but I think it is worthwhile to have that discussion.
I think additionally, like the emergency department mentality is when someone comes and needs help, offer them all the resources. And it's maybe someone who comes every week, maybe even every day. You keep offering, and maybe one day they'll take you up on it. And so that opportunity to just say, hey, we're just going to have things available. And maybe today it doesn't sound interesting, but maybe next week it will. Or maybe, and so it's a little bit of just like staying in front of those people. And if we can identify them through different programs, like,
Mhm.
You know, I think Tom's point is really important, that it requires really deep thinking and creativity, right? Because everybody is struggling with this issue of engagement. I mean, colleges, the quads are empty now.
Well,
Used to be
some
like-
are,
it used to
some
be-
are.
Well,
Almost. Well,
Yeah.
Actually, this is-
Yeah.
That's actually a really important point, is
Yeah.
that they haven't been out at all, and they're, vacant, and now there's this huge surge because they're going, oh my God, being together and being around something that's meaningful feels amazing.
Mhm.
And how do you kind of get people to read it? Because the reality is, we all are getting sucked into computers. That's where a lot of the time is going, because people are forgetting what happens when you're doing something together. And this is the profound question, but creativity, like the Meals on Wheels idea. And I think schools are trying to figure out like clubs and stuff like that. Nobody's joining clubs anymore. I mean, all these churches are really interesting one, church attendance down.
Right.
Really interesting to know that number, by the way.
You're right. We don't.
That's
yeah.
really powerful connectivity that
Right.
elevates.
Right. Try and identify ways to build community, and connectivity is a great word, because I think it's a positive one, and it reflects loneliness and isolation. Social media, that's totally, if you're on your own watching, you're like this all the time, you're not connecting, or if you are, it can be very negative the way you are.
I wonder, Alyssa McKenzie, I wonder, Senator Murphy, I don't know if you've seen, has really taken this on as, it seems to me, based on his social media, like his main sort of cause at the moment, which is isolation and lack of community. And they do have a lot of funding opportunities through that office. So I wonder if it would be prudent for us to meet with someone in his office and ask, what data do they have? What are they looking at in Connecticut? And then how could we maybe even work with them or utilize their funding to try to bring this about here?
100%. I also would throw out there, Meals on Wheels are great. Get About's great in terms of giving us data of who those individuals are, but so is EMS, right? If you go to any emergency department, which I used to work at, you sometimes see the exact same people coming into the emergency department. They're isolated, they have mental health issues, other things. EMS giving you an indication of, here's our frequent flyers, right? Here are the homes that we're going to all the time. Same thing with the police department. Here's the domestic violence uh, doors that we knock on every couple weeks. That to me, we can get to the why. We can, effectuate it there before they end up in the emergency department, before a suicide occurs, before something more severe occurs.
I will mention there's a parent group in New Canaan. I do happen to be a part of it, so I don't know if I need to step back in that space, but it's called New Canaan Unplugged, and there's 6 parents trying to create a tide of let's delay technology introduction into our kids and do it in a healthier way. And so that's hopefully growing and trying to encourage parents, particularly in elementary schools, to sign the Wait Until 8th pledge and trying to create some momentum there.
Wait to sign what kind of pledge?
The Wait Until 8th pledge. So it's a national pledge that encourages parents to hold on smartphones until the end of 8th grade.
Oh, 8th grade.
And then,
It was 8 PM.
yeah, yeah. And so, yeah. Yeah, so it's encouraging them to wait until the end of 8th grade. Our hope is to kind of create conversation and, a place where parents in New Canaan can think through something that's potentially uniquely New Canaan. But that idea of just being a rallying point, because there has been increased conversation that New Canaan Cares has actually started around all of this. And there's definitely a national wave towards we need to do this differently. So there's a small thing hopefully going, but
Has anybody done that successfully, by the way?
in Greenwich. So Greenwich uses they have a okay to delay kind of program. I would say it's like their website isn't overly built out. What I do know is there has been a parent who actually, me and another parent from our group we're meeting with her, but has managed to get 66% of the 3rd grade parents at Greenwich Academy to sign Wait Until 8th. And so it's a little bit of that collective spirit, right? Of if we do this together, kind of, hopefully there's a
I was gonna
shift.
say, you can't let any New Canaanites into Greenwich. Or I was thinking my grandchildren go to St. Luke's. And
Yeah.
they each had phones at 10. So you have to.
And so a little bit of trying to understand when that happens, because there's increasing research that it's the combination, not necessarily just a phone, but it's a smartphone plus social media plus actually a front-facing camera that really leads to mental health decline. And, in a lot of ways that just totally makes sense, right? Like it doesn't necessarily seem overtly scientific. Yeah.
Interesting.
That feels like a really good example of a preventative idea. Like a positive movement builds community and is looking to kind of nip something before it becomes an issue. Like, I feel like that is a perfect example of things that we could be doing.
There's an article in the Wall Street Journal over the last 2 weeks. I don't know if you saw it or not. Where other towns like St. Louis and others that tried to, smartphones are not allowed in school. You have to put your smartphones in lockdown and whatever. And the pushback came from the parents, not from the kids, because they wanted to be able to reach their kids whenever they wanted to reach them and to track them and a whole bunch of other things. So there's a prime example. There's some research out there already of other towns and what the barriers that they saw. But it was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, and there's an article in the Washington Post yesterday, actually, that a town in Connecticut has successfully done it. I'll find which town
Yeah.
it is.
And Barb, I sent you the Silver Hill list of programs that are coming up. The one he was referring to is one of, I think, about 10 that are coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I'm not on the library's list.
No, this comes directly from Silver Hill.
Oh, doesn't, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Middle school in Manchester, Connecticut.
Pretty big
Yeah.
town.
And I think even here in New Canaan, at the New Canaan Cares most recent talk about these areas, that was one of the questions, how many people in the room texted their child at school today? And the number of hands that go up, people who are.
Was it high?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just because people have become used to being able to say, I mean, when we were growing up, your parents didn't have the opportunity to remind you of things at noon.
You had to do
You
it.
either talked at breakfast or you didn't get reminded,
Yeah.
right? And so, but it's become now, people feel like it's really important to be able to say, remember to get on so-and-so's bus, or remember to do, and that feels really important to them, but we need to kind of shift back to, it's okay, we can, you know, you
I
don't need
remember
to
when
be.
they
engaged.
first, they first started letting the parents see the grades of the quizzes.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank God, I'm just leaving the school
That's another
system.
preventative.
Because I
mental health
think that's
issue.
so difficult when they go, look what you did today on your quiz. I mean,
Yeah.
poor kid.
Mhm. But it is just as much of an adult problem
Yeah.
as it is
that's what I'm
with
saying,
kids.
yeah.
Like, it feels easier
Yeah.
to
That's the
stop it
point.
before they get it. And I have 3 kids, so that's where my passion point is, right? But that idea of, it's definitely pervasive.
And babies are, and young children, I've seen the studies, but when parents are just looking at their phone, it's the same as stone-faced children. Studies from years ago, where
Yeah.
a child isn't getting the facial,
Interaction, yeah. Wow,
That's fascinating.
that's
it's
interesting.
so scary.
But I would argue it's 100% adult issue, because the adults
They
set
want
a
to
rules
control
for the
it,
kids, and
right.
of course, the kids are gonna say, I wanna have ice cream for breakfast. And I wanna stay up till 11:30 at night, and I want to be on social media when I'm 10. And it really does come down to the adults saying no.
You know,
Right?
the
Or
problem
getting them
is
to a
not
place where
the
they're.
child talking to the adult, it's all the stuff that the child does when he's talking to social networks and
Yeah.
friends and whatnot, when they're not talking to the parent, which is a small amount. Yeah.
You're right, the parent issue, that's.
It is 100%.
Look, it's all about education. And I think if we could have
Education.
if we have a role in educating, I think that is a admirable role for this commission. I think if you look at, I'll come back to study drugs, because that's hot on my topic right now from what I'm seeing in kids, and now that I have 8. But I just think educating a family member on things to look for when final week is occurring. What are you seeing? Mood swings in your kid? Are you seeing depression and them crashing the day after exams and things of that nature? We live in a type A personality town, as we know, and there are a lot of pressures being put on kids to succeed and excel. And I think that gets back to the why. Cell phones, yes, but others for parents to be educated on things to pick up on little behavioral changes in their children, to say, oh, I might have an issue. I need to have a discussion with them on that, or I need to track other things. So I'm on the preventive side. If there's things that we can identify early on, identify the why and the root, and put resources towards that, then to me, the multiplier of that downstream is incredible.
The education piece is great.
Yeah.
And
Prevent it,
it
yeah.
gives us direction somewhat. But, we see what health department does in terms of educating. We see what the schools do. We see what Jackie sends out on a monthly basis, X number of topics of being lectures, et cetera, covering all sorts of different issues. So we would be a supplement to that. Is there a need there? So when you discharge people from the ER and you give them a resource, is there any follow-up with that? Some emergency rooms do and some don't.
Yeah, and it depends on the complaint. So
Okay.
it depends on why they were there.
But getting that data, being a data person, is important. So when we do our little holiday gifts and distribute, the isolation to me and the super senior, we'll call them, healthcare issues and what attention they're getting. They know Bethany and they know Marcy, but what's the frequency of the contacts? Because they are lonely. And it's moving when we distribute these little holiday gifts to see these people. And it's just, we could be doing more in terms of, so we need numbers like that in terms of frequency. So I think once we get, we can do that to an extent ourselves through our human services department.
Yeah.
But once this, and I haven't been a big survey person, as I said, way back when, based on hospital stuff, because nothing ever came of the surveys other than paying the the company's doing the surveys. But to get numbers here, so if the surveys that New Canaan Community Foundation with Silver Hill is going to give us, those kind of numbers, maybe we can zero in a little better and use that as our point in terms of education, et cetera.
That's a really neat point, Harrison, because I think that we could ask some very different questions. As an example, how many groups are you affiliated with? Because one thing is really powerful, like I talked to Moran Foundation about doing a education program around governance. Teach, folks who are moving to the town how to be a good board member. And that's good for the town, but it's also good that you're going to meet like we do. If you meet with people over time, you really build relationships and you feel connected, like the New Canaan Men's Club, right? I mean, the great stuff that comes from that, just meeting with people over time. Now I'm going real root cause on connectivity and stuff like that, because it's great to feel like, yeah, I know 200 people in New Canaan as acquaintances. There are 10 people that I see a lot and I can lean on. That is incredibly powerful from a mental health perspective. And this is where, because the education stuff is, we have lots of events and stuff like that. I think if we promote some other things around connectivity, if you bang people over the head, like work on your mental health.
Right.
A lot of people,
Right.
I'm not nuts.
and I just notice from all the peer stuff that I'm involved with, you can't pitch. When I'm pitching now, because they just get together over time, you're gonna get super close relationship. There's gotta be another reason
Right.
for people to get together that is more positive, but the benefit that happens is different.
There's a lot of studies that even like, volunteering, that's part of the power of volunteering, right? Is that creation of community around service.
But you don't pitch that, it happens, you're always
Right.
surprised.
Right.
Like I come in something like this, I'm surveyed and all that. I come out with so much more than I put in. I learned so much more of you and getting to know you. And
But I think what you're talking about is bridging between the two, because you can hear, understand, agree, and believe in all of the benefits to connecting. And it's helping people bridge getting from knowing that to actually doing it.
there's just gotta be another,
Yeah, that little
benefit.
step in between that kind of helps bridge, like you were saying. Here are all the ways you can get involved, or here are all of the, groups meeting in our community that want you to be involved. It's kind of helping people get from here to here. Because we're doing a really good job, I think, for a town of our size, telling people why it's important, or educating people about why it's important and how it's beneficial. And then the next step is, how do you get, because that can be a real sticking point for people, especially if they're already feeling isolated and not great.
and it gets way more intense with kids.
Yeah.
Because I think there's an adult issue of lonesomeness, basic suicide rate in Canada is the men. It's what's actually happening. So, but kids are having the same issue. They're so sucked in, brains aren't developed. But how do they, how do we get on with the football game?
Interestingly enough, I'm thinking as you're talking about older men and suicide, and Harrison's comment, who we met this lady who had during our Christmas gift, who needed help, and she had been offered help by the staff, by Bethany and et cetera, over the years. The problem, or my real point here, is you never know. My exposure to seniors, and now that I am one,
When did that happen?
they're like kids. You
Last
never
week.
know when they're listening.
Yeah.
And education is a challenge at all demographics, but particularly at each end of the polarization of age. But from the standpoint that, yeah, one of the things we always assume that seniors are now well taken care of with staying put in the men's club and et cetera, et cetera. to your point, though, there's still problems that evolve. And one of the reasons, actually, we find out next week whether we got the AARP national grant to promote the urgent assessment to seniors to try to get more than 8% to sign up.
The senior isolation is an issue, and I'll just give one
Yeah.
anecdotal story with our telemedicine program and well over 100 seniors that we have on it. We have certain people that we reach out to because you have the screen monitoring everything. We can't get off the phone.
Yeah.
You can't get off the screen. That is their only interaction with anyone that day. And while they're taking meds and things of that nature, they want to talk about their grandkids that never called them, or their kids that have moved away, or their husband that passed away 5 years ago. So you develop more than just, you're not taking your blood pressure correctly. Your vital signs are off. Let's get you in to see your primary care physician. That isolation is a huge factor right now. And I think for the senior population, it is. That's why, you look at the end, congregate housing, when they get together, all of a sudden, it's completely changing personality. Now they have friends, they're eating, and it's a cocktail hour, absolutely.
But getting back to seniors though, I think it's important to recognize that when you say to somebody, you need to join Staying Put, they say, what? I'm not, I'm perfectly independent. Jim's still not a member. Okay, just so you know. So you can't just, so it's gotta present it in a really positive, and kind of thinking back on like the welcome wagon, where somebody would move to town, I don't know if that woman's, if she still does that or not. But does she? But, and she'd say, here's this resource and that resource, and you kind of, thanks, fine. But if there were a way to say to people, here are all these great community resources when they come to town, you want to be a volunteer, go to the Beautification League. They need you to plant. You don't have to have any skill except you can dig, tulips up. And if there were a way to try and do it positively and say, well, Staying Put is great because there are all these great events, as opposed to, we'll help you be safe in your home, which is, it's just,
And sometimes it's a
So-
buddy system, right?
Right.
So in order to get Jim to come to Get About, maybe you've got to, have someone that's his buddy that comes and picks him up.
That needs to.
But it's an interesting point. Newcomers
Right.
pulls in a really high percent of people who are new to town,
You're right. That's
and
kind of the
they
model.
must have data.
Mhm,
They
that's a
do.
good Point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my wife.
Because I know they were here 10
years
years ago when I got here, and I'm sure they were there 10 years before that. And maybe it's like at a certain anniversary, there's a touch point of, hey, you've been in New Canaan for 10 years.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You've been here
Because
for
they have
20
the data.
years.
Yeah.
You've been here for 30, 40. They've
Yeah.
got to have that.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
One of the pitches for the Senior Men's Club is there are 340 members or thereabouts right now.
Wow.
Probably no less than 12 different activities that you can do something every day. In fact, now one of the things that's happening, because every Friday when they meet, they talk about what's available this week. And you're now getting conflicts between the opera group and the outer group, and the life group. I mean, so anybody that's lonely that belongs to the men's club, it's their own damn fault.
The issue is how do you get that person who's isolated to a club or
Join,
to
yeah.
join? That
They
gets
go to
back to
one
the, that
meeting
gets
and they
back
don't
to the
know
why.
anybody and they.
Yeah, they
They
don't
don't go,
connect.
okay.
with-
Connect with anyone and that's.
Is there an opportunity to put some kind of like palm card into the basket that goes out?
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's interesting because coming from a different direction, a lot of groups are struggling to find enough volunteers.
Right.
Actually, I mean, this is something that.
Oh, is that
I
right?
think in Conversation
Like
with.
Oh,
who?
yeah.
Because that would be-
Every organization
Everybody.
I'm part of.
Everybody. I mean, just talk to anyone knee deep in Mayfair like I am right now. It's really, really different than it used to be.
Yeah, they're a couple of
And
hundred
I
short.
was just in a meeting with the League of Women Voters. They're doing less programming because they can't find people to actually run things, that people like to go to events. This is the opposite of the isolation issue.
Yeah.
People who do like to go to events,
Yeah.
but they're not that interested in making those things happen. And it almost feels like this could come from both sides,
Mhm.
because reach out to the people who do need more connection, who maybe,
Ask them to do,
would be
take
able
a role on. Yeah.
to take these roles on.
Right.
It could be helpful from a lot of ways, and when you are also talking to people about, hey, this organization really needs people, as opposed to, you should get out. I get involved in this organization
Right.
and make some friends.
Yeah,
You
right,
know,
right,
it's
right.
a
Again,
way
the
to kind of
positive
come at it
spin,
because
right.
It does have the,
Mhm,
you know, the positive effect from both directions.
mhm.
I also.
I also think that there's an issue. I think in organizations that are short on volunteers, there's a lot of people who, whether they recognize it or not, are very burnt out. And I think there's a lot of children who are actually also very burnt out. And so I think that's a layer too, is, and sometimes you still overschedule yourself when you're burnt out because you don't want to sit with yourself in silence and hear your brain tell you what is going on.
Hmm.
So I think people keep themselves really, really busy, but it's topical.
But the busy, honestly, all the interstitial time we have goes here. You have 5 extra minutes, you don't have 5 minutes to do a couple chores, you have 5 minutes to check your stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what eats up all the time and creates that sense of being overwhelmed and
Well,
busy. And this is why I love the interpersonal stuff. And I mean, there's also the other phenomenon where like, I know tons of people, but I'm still lonely,
Mhm.
meaning that
Right.
you don't have the depth.
You're not connected.
Well, this is not 10 people or 5. This is a great statistic. Like for men in 1990, 19% of men in the US thought they had 3 or fewer great friends. 2021, that number was 49%.
Interesting.
So this, and you know, when I was talking about older men, it's honestly, it's the 50-year-old.
It's a
That's
50 to
it.
70.
You know, they're popular, but there aren't people they can really connect to and talk to.
Well, the
and-
success.
Email me that number.
Well,
I'll put it in front of the men's club.
Mhm.
you know, depression takes on a lot of different forms, and one of, we see depression is just exhaustion. So they don't even feel like they can go out because they're just exhausted.
Yeah.
And they're not exhausted because they're actually doing things. They're exhausted because they're depressed, and it's just feeding it and making them more isolated. And so again, I love the root cause. I love figuring out why and putting the investment into that. I just think the multiplier effect is so much greater.
Well, there's an element of root cause and prevention. And maybe if you change enough for a certain generation, it grows in a healthy way, but to completely ignore the people on the other side, like you can't, right? If I'm articulating myself right on that, but so that idea of, okay, then how do you specifically say to those people who are in that marginal zone that were available? I love the idea of a communications card, you know, when we're actually accessing those people, but maybe it's also a little bit of like either questions or resources, or, you know, like where do you find enjoyment and how can you engage there or something. And so it's, I don't, and you'd have to word it right and get some,
Yeah.
be really thoughtful about it. But you know, the other thing that's a little bit weighing on me is from the church engagement piece, because I do think that point is really critical and attendance is certainly down. I'd be curious though if people in town feel plugged in also and how those numbers weigh. Because I do think post-COVID, a lot of people are like, oh, I just watch online and that's sufficient. Or maybe they're still afraid to go back to church because it's a large gathering or, you know, multiple variables. But I do think I drive past it on Sunday mornings. I think St. Mark's still has a group that meets outside,
Yes.
right? And so there are,
Through rain, snow and God knows
yeah,
what.
which is amazing for those people who may say
Same.
like, hey, this still scares me, or, but just, they may not even know
But we
something
had
like that exists.
2,000 people there for Easter
Wow.
inside.
Well, Harrison, I'm just, I want to ask
Two-
you this question. Would it make
two
sense for
sessions.
us, because we've got all these really good ideas and we've got Lauren coming? Is there a way for us to kind of have, instead of everybody's going to throw ideas at her, should we try and articulate as a group sort of what we think are the most critical questions before we meet with her? I'm just throwing that out as an idea. I don't know exactly how we do that. Just.
Well, I think
I
it
mean,
goes back to our
I'm up
priorities.
for anything, but I
Yeah.
think that we individually can present based on our knowledge and experience.
Right.
What we think this community needs, and she can compile the data. And
Oh,
move-
yeah,
And
no,
move that
I'm-
on
yeah.
to the survey people.
Okay.
I mean, we have this list and then some. When you're
Send her
mentioning
this
that,
list.
Yeah, I guess
when
just
you're
give her that
mentioning
list, you're right.
church attendance, so Peter Dodds, who was the urologist chair of surgery at Norwalk X number of years ago, hospital. Peter was a Presbyterian, lived in Wilton. So he was a researcher and had written a few articles. So they asked him why the attendance at Presbyterian functions had decreased. So he went out and took this thing. So it was not just the Presbyterian church in Wilton, with very few exceptions. It was everywhere. And it wasn't just the churches and the synagogues and the mosques. It was the American Legion. It was every other organization that a generation ago was a social entity. This generation, none. So that's reflective of non-joiners and non-volunteers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a different mindset.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I know Peter Walsh at St. Mark's has spent a lot of time thinking, speaking, looking into this issue.
Yeah.
Mostly around churches, because that's his realm, but also he's just a huge reader. He's an interesting person to talk to about what the trends.
Figured it
look
out.
like. Well, there were 2,000 people at Easter service on Sunday, so to some
How about-
extent, maybe, I
About
don't know.
Sunday after.
Maybe.
200.
Back to 200, but it is the Episcopal Church. We are famously very excited about Sunday Easter.
Church like.
Priesters.
The pastor at the Catholic Church always says at the big service, you know, we do this every week.
Yeah.
And there's a huge laugh from the crowd every time he
Yeah,
does it.
yeah.
But I mean, there are a lot of, people putting a lot of thought into these similar issues.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of information out there for us to kind of gather and become educated about what the national trends are and then where they apply to our local community, because some of them will.
That's another group that we could have come here or ask them, because I know that they meet, and I'm sure they have issues that they're dealing with. And there is research that just came out over the last 2 weeks in terms of the connectivity between attendance and in church and mental health.
There's an article in the Wall Street Journal.
Oh,
yeah,
I saw that.
yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is supporting everything that we're saying here. There is research to support.
I mean, listen, it's anthropological, right?
Yeah.
We have to be, if you are isolated back in the day, I mean, I'm talking millions of years ago,
When most people were.
you were isolated, you would die. You had to be in association with others. That was the only way to survive. And I would argue that's still true
The
today
Harvard,
for different reasons.
the Harvard, I cite this often in my talks, but the Harvard Adult Development Study is the longest running study
Oh, yeah.
in, modern science, right? But the people who were the most socially connected at 50 were physically the healthiest at 80.
Mm.
And so, I mean, that's really palpable, right?
Very
That's a
logical, yeah.
really logical, tangible piece that speaks to this anthropological need to
Mhm.
be connected.
I know the study well, and the guy who is in charge of it, when asked, what's the one key thing that correlates with happiness over time, is irrespective of demographics, is the quality of your relationships. Full stop.
Well, and I think that's like what I think about, at least with people my age. Like, I see a lot of people I'm close with who are looking for a more superficial relationship for like Friday and Saturday nights. They don't want to go deep with anybody and they want to sort of escape. And you can imagine what they use to do that. And so it looks on the surface like they have this great group of friends that they're seeing every single weekend, but it's just an outlet and it's not necessarily people that you can call when you're actually in a crisis, or you just haven't built up the relationship to be able to do that. Maybe you could, but it's just not what the actual goal of the relationship is.
And that goes back, I mean, I'll put myself up on the flagpole, the addicted to success is that I'm working all the time. And when I turn, lunches down or dinners down, it's because I'm working, right? And you have to balance that lifestyle. It's not healthy to continue. So I'd be the poster child for that. But that's something, we talked about addicted to success. I mean, that is really trying to open somebody up and saying, okay, now you're working at home or hybrid and you're now focused you can get in your pajamas at 3 o'clock in the morning and start doing some work and things of that nature. That's not healthy, right? We need you to, when you went into work, you had a social engagement with your coworkers as compared to trying to do everything yourself.
That was actually one of my questions too, around the lack of volunteers. I do think, and it'd be interesting to know the numbers on this, but I do think the number of dual working parents has increased in town post-COVID, which I think is probably impacting that.
It's been, a
It's
trend
been
that's
studied.
changing. When my kids were in preschool, there were maybe 1 or 2 moms who got back to work full-time. It's really
It looks really different.
One thing, I'm involved in recruiting for different organizations, but one thing I've really seen is that the younger moms, the 40-year-olds, they'll do things, but they all related to their kids. You know, we say, do you want to be on the board of Historical Society? And they'll say, no, but I'll plan a tea and everybody can come, and that's great, and it's connected, but they don't want necessarily a leadership role, or really, they want a one-off kind of deal. And so they are doing things, I think, right? Okay, you're saying you're one of those.
But I mean, I am, but then I'm sitting here, so.
Yeah,
probably-
true. That's hard to argue with. That's really nice. They're doing fun things with their, and maybe they're also working, and so that's even more
We're all
important to them.
So we've had a good erudite discussion on this, but is there an action step for the commission to, all right.
Sorry, say it again.
We've had an erudite discussion on this, and I'm fascinated, learned a lot. But is there something the commission can propose as a initiative to make people more connected, or?
Well, what we're doing
That's-
is this,
that's a
this was
big-
a good meeting.
It's a
We're
big
laying-
nut.
We're laying the groundwork. We do want to be effective. We want to do something that's needed in town. So we're gonna, we have to come up with an answer of what exactly that is. Maybe we'll get some information, hopefully from the survey, but that's, by the time that's done, we're looking at 4 months down the road, whatever. And there are many issues, and we do want to direct something. Like the education recipe is big. Maybe getting metrics on some of the stuff is
That's
important.
really-
But, we did want to have a meeting where we can just talk, and we did that. So we can take what we've learned and heard and inculcate it and see where we're going.
Well,
Can I
maybe,
just ask, oh, sorry.
maybe we codify the 3 things that we've talked about. Kind of the big themes seem to be the mental health, broadly defined, all demographics, addiction, and then this preventive wellness theme. That's a start, at least. And that we can
The
talk about
wellness
that.
hits- The wellness hits every parameter.
It does, but it's the
Connectivity.
preventive,
Yeah, maybe connectivity.
Yeah.
and it's
That's
the
a good theme.
preventive angle, because that's,
Wellness.
but that's, that I think is a decent,
Oh.
Tom, to.
She's so busy as a volunteer.
I am.
Just somewhere else.
This is actually
Okay.
my mellow part-time job that's taken over my life.
Oh. She works at the Carriage Barn.
Oh,
Wait, can I just ask, Cheryl, you're sitting here.
Oh.
You've seen a lot. I just thought it'd be interesting to hear your perspective, and you don't have to answer if you don't want, but you've certainly seen a lot of.
lady.
You want to do it online?
Should we
Yes,
take?
I think you, maybe I can.
Yeah, come over here, 'cause I think you've been listening.
Yeah, no, I don't need to
There
do
you
that.
go. Let's get this.
No, it's exciting to sit and listen because I think you guys are hitting the key points that the commission needs to look at. And I was making some notes as you were speaking. I think it would be great to have your SROs in, your student resource officers that are in your schools. They are seeing what you're talking about, and they may be able to come in and say, okay, we see this need or that need. Your guidance counselors, Aggie from your senior center, because they're going to be able to let you know what they're seeing as key issues as we're coming into the summer. I think the other part is Jackie gets, I think, close to $30,000 for the Youth Service Bureau. So maybe look at those funds and how you're spending. I know different communities have put money towards social workers that work with the police department, so that when they go on calls, they have that mental health piece. So I think there's funds out there also that you guys are part of that maybe you can look at. How are we spending the Youth Service Bureau funds? How are we spending the opioid funds? I think it's important for the commission to understand that a little bit more. So
So that's
think
Jackie
good too. Where
Delory.
does Jackie get that money from?
Jackie gets it from the state. It's available to all communities and you have to do reports and she has to figure out how she's spending it and reports in, but maybe rather than sending $500 to a luncheon, that you take a bigger amount and put 5,000 towards something that's going to make a difference.
Would it make sense to have the CFO come here and give us an idea of the breadth of the money and how it's being spent and things of that
Either that
nature?
or have Jackie put a report into you guys saying, okay, this year, this
See,
is how we
Jackie, maybe-
spent the 30,000. Because it's maybe rather than using little bits, you take a big part next year and put it towards something on one of your top 3 areas.
So you know, I'm a big, that's great. That's so helpful. Thank you. And that's just new information. We didn't know. But you know, I'm a big proponent of panels. But one of the ideas that you're saying might be interesting is to have Aggie and the senior resource officers. I mean, we can't get somebody in every meeting. We only have 10 meetings, but do, you know, have several people come and talk and we'd see some overlap and maybe your topic is loneliness and isolation and you'd see it from different age cohorts.
But we could, you know, I think, you know, as we're talking about spending money and being stewards of that money, resources for the town, having the CFO and Jackie here saying, here are the budgetary dollars. This is what we have. This is what we're looking at for this year. Then helps us, I think, help them say, this is where we'd like the money to be
Right.
spent.
Even
Be
your
more
food
prudent.
bank, I mean, you've got a large amount in there that's being donated. How are you using those dollars?
Yeah.
So I think understanding all of your budgets
Right.
would be helpful, kind of working with Jackie and Marcy. if that's-
And
We just
how
focus
do
on
we,
Bethany's budget.
how do we take the
Right.
food bank and Meals on Wheels and maybe even put those things together and supporting each other? I mean, there's a,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Good thought.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Just
Very
have
helpful.
fun.
Thank
Wow,
you.
that's just great
You're welcome.
information. Good to know. Yeah. I'm exhausted.
Thank you, Joan.
How about you? No, this is great discussion.
Okay, Russ, I think you have to do your job.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Thank you for freeing me up so that I have that extra time.
Well, I know of all of us, well, we're busy to varying degrees, but you are
Great.
as busy as anyone.
Great to have you here.
Motion to adjourn.
Real day job.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you again for attending.
We made it.
Have a
Really
great
good
week.
coffee they have. Next time.
I don't the coffee.
In the little
It's good-
kitchen
is it-
down
Oh,
at the
the
end.
other end there. Oh,
The
great.
Keurig, I did the dark roast, like Green Mountain. It's really good.
I have 2 cups before I come here in the morning.
Yeah, I
So
only had one,
Peter.
so I was like, it's
Barely-
convenient.
Barely
Peter.
gets me awake.
What were your numbers on the male
Interesting for Cheryl to-
close friendship thing?
I didn't know about it. I mean,
Can we stop recording? Are we recording?
But I want to get an exact.
You mean from 40 dropping? Yeah, yeah.
I will, thank you.
Okay.
No, can go out, but you can pop by.
19%.
Let's get out, let's get away.
Yeah, that's big.